Good day. I'm Vincent Saxtetter, and this is the After the Age of Fire channel. This is episode 53, recorded on July 4th, 2026, and released on July 11th. The title of this episode is The Human Race in Collapse. I'll unpack that as the episode goes on. But first, this is a prepping channel. It's meant to help you and your family line prepare to flourish and thrive and reproduce in the coming era. We're ending an era in which the human race, doubled our consumption of just about everything every 22 years. So every generation had about twice as much as the previous generation. And that's ending sometime around now. And we're going to arrive at an era where we won't be doubling our consumption anymore. And in fact, we'll have a little less than we do now. We'll have about half as much energy and probably roughly half as much of other resources as we do now. So right now we are consuming about 46,000 calories from coal, oil, and gas and renewables. About 10% of that is what we call renewables and nuclear, and 41,000 calories is coal, oil, and gas. Plus we get another 15,000 calories from food, fodder, and wood. Adds up to 60,000. In the coming era, it'll be more like 30,000 from a combination of the usual suspects, somewhere around there. If you want to know why and how we can know that, go back to the first third of this section of this channel's content, roughly from episode 10 to episode 38, where I went over every energy source in detail, its cost, and all the risks and problems that come with it, and what we're likely to be willing to live with in order to get our energy long term. So how do you flourish, thrive, and reproduce in the coming era? Well, so the first third of this content up until episode 38 was about the era of doubling and about how much energy we'll be able to get long term. Then starting in episode 39 until episode 56, there's that section of the content is about the transition between the two eras, how to recognize the transition and where are we in it. And we're finishing out that section of the content. Right now we're in episode 53, the 15th out of 18 episodes on the transition. And then starting on episode 57, we'll be talking about the coming era and how to prepare for that. So finally we'll be getting into the actual prepping content. Until now it's about understanding where we are. I think it's very important to get your head in the right place so you can make wise decisions. So in a way it has been prepping, but as for actual ideas about what you would actually do to prepare well, that'll come starting in episode 57 or so. Right now we're still in the section on the transition. We're finishing it out. And the initial question that we asked is, what trajectory are we following? It's a bit like a stunt biker taking off from a ramp. We've been accelerating our consumption of things, doubling, going up and up and up. And at some point, your stunt biker goes off the ramp, and so he no longer has support for his continued upward trajectory, so he actually begins falling at that point. He's still going up, but he's going up slower and slower. And at some point he'll reverse course and come back down. And the question is, have we already left the ramp? Of course, a little bit different from a stunt biker. We'll come down, not to where we started, but to about half of where we are now. So already we're consuming somewhere around 1,000 times as much energy worldwide as we were 250 years ago. Half of that isn't much less than, it's still a factor of 500 instead of a factor of 1,000. Okay, it's roughly where we were in 1970. But still, the question still stands: what trajectory do we take on the way from as we leave the ramp and and continue to fly forward, and then at some point we'll reverse course a little bit. And uh, um, so, it's not a question that you can answer based, at least I don't think you can answer it based on pure reason alone. You have to observe where we are right now and think about it. So this section of the content has been about observation, not prediction, looking at the signs of the times. And so some of the main points so far, and finally in this episode I'm going to wind up this discussion, tell you the main point, and we'll be winding it up for this episode and in the next 3 episodes, and then we'll finally be done. But some of the main points so far: episode 40, there's no particular reason why this transition between the 2 eras should be particularly smooth or orderly. Episode 42, whatever's happening, we're entering a loss of control and of unpredictability. That's a given, considering that we would really like to continue doubling, and we feel like if we're not doubling, we're not successful. If we're not increasing our economy and our wealth and everything year on year by some percentage point, we're not successful. We'd really like that. So if in this new era where we're no longer able to double, that's certainly a loss of control. But overall, even being able to predict and understand the pattern that we're in and how and the trajectory that we follow, we can't seem to even control the trajectory. In episodes 48, 49, and 51, actually all 4 from 48 to 51, were about whether we are sort of organizing to make a pivot of our own, whether there's some sort of decision making or reorganization going on, where the human race itself sees that something new is coming and pivots to enter a new way of life that's matched to the new conditions. And one mark of that might be a sign that we're accelerating something, and maybe accelerating our progress in some way, or accelerating our economy, or anything, our way of our intellectual developments. Another sign might be a sign that of top-down control of the human race, that more and more control belongs to the rich and the wealthy and the powerful. And I discussed all of these possibilities at length in episodes 48 through 51. In the end, there's no sign at all that I can understand, and I think I made strong arguments that there really is no sign that we're accelerating toward anything particular. If anything, our progress is slowing down. It really looks like our economy, worldwide economic development, is certainly slowing down. The only question is how much, and whether we're actually in recession. How long have we been in recession, or are we still increasing a little bit economically? And intellectual development, sure, there are still things going on in this last 100 years, but they don't look that great compared to what was going on in previous centuries, the last 500 centuries. You look at those century by century and see what sort of revolutions were going on in human intellect and development, and whatever was going on in this most recent century was very interesting, but it certainly doesn't outcompete or outdo anything before that. So there's no reorganization of our own making in the works. Whatever happens, certainly there will be a reorganization, as we will have to live with less energy, and we'll have to live with not doubling our consumption anymore. But it won't be our doing. We won't be reorganizing for it. It will happen to us, as at least reading the signs of the times. And finally we come to this episode, and and I'll be following on in the next 2 episodes, and then uh, where we really are, what's really going on in this transition. Um, it, it, where we really are is that we are preparing for a reorganization. It's not the sort of reorganization where a bunch of people fight or cooperate or in some way signal, and or whether somebody in charge rules and says this is the way things will be to make some. It's instead the sort of reorganization that happens to aging structures and aging people, that um, structures and people and organisms in general, under pressure and shocks, they every little bit of them as they age changes and prepares and reorganizes, so that at some point, when the collapse finally does happen, the whole thing will collapse together. It won't be because of if you look at an aged person who dies, okay, you'll find that it wasn't one thing that went wrong. In general, you'll find that 20 things went wrong, and that they may have spent the last 3 months. In fact, this happened to one of my aunts recently. They spent the last year. She spent the last year in a hospice in a nursing home. The last couple of years, in the last weeks in a hospice, and then in a hospital. You know, in the end, there were so many things wrong. That it was impossible to treat anything. Um, that's the way. So everything reinforces everything else, and when the bridge finally comes down, it comes down because everything was wrong with it, not one thing. So that's what's going on with the human race. What sort of collapse? I'm talking about the collapse of our doublings. Okay, we're still trying to double. Okay, we're still trying to continue our economic growth, and maybe we are. I can't say for sure. I've expressed some doubts, and you can review the recent episodes about those doubts on episodes 45 and 46. Maybe we're still growing, but it's a sort of growth that's very, very dearly bought, and it's unclear whether it's really giving us any benefit, or whether a moment will come and then the last 50 years of growth will just disappear like smoke. I mean, some things will remain. I expect that much of our knowledge of how to make digital technologies will remain, for instance, but the actual level of economic production and consumption may revert to where it was in 1970, or some other. I don't know exactly where, but we may have a drop. You know, if you have an aged person, they can make themselves look still young by going to the gym, by wearing makeup and prosthetics and clothing that make them look younger than they are. But it all masks something about their whole body, that they're getting more and more fragile and weak no matter what they do, and that a collapse is coming. Nothing's certain in life except death and taxes, it said. Well, certainly death is certain. So let me make a couple points buttressing this statement. One is episodes 14 and 15. We talked about our supply of coal, oil, and gas, which is our main supply of energy. It remains that way today, and we have not yet run out of energy, or in fact of other resources, and I explained that we could probably double our consumption of energy one more time if we were willing to just go for broke with mining coal. We could do it, and maybe natural gas, but that would be a temporary doubling, and then we would revert to something below where we are today. Okay, but we could continue going, consuming more and more for another 30 years. Okay. we aren't um, we aren't at the point where we have to stop doubling. But nonetheless, if you look at episodes 45 and 46, it seems that the progress and economic growth that we are achieving is becoming less and less credible. It's hard to be sure whether the year-on-year economic growth that's reported for the world is real anymore, um, or whether it might not be substantially less. Already it's smaller than it used to be, um, or whether it's certainly slowing down. We're slowing down, but and it's not certain that we're actually expanding at all or how long we've been expanding. So what we have is a situation where we don't our resources available to us are not forcing us to slow down, but nonetheless we're slowing down. And what's going on is that we're carrying a burden that we used to not have. Okay, we're no longer running freely as a human race. We used to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that were given to us and just go for broke, and instead now we're under some sort of burden and we're staggering along trying to continue growing. So in episodes 34 and 35 I explained what the burden is. The burden is that we've stepped quite far, and we keep walking further away from the way that the human body and human mind was designed. I mean that our human race grew up living in. We're hunter-gatherers. That's our natural way of living, and that's the way we gather energy. That's the way that we provide for ourselves, and we keep taking steps further and further away from that way of life. And each step has some advantages, but also has some disadvantages. And we just getting and the disadvantages, which I call poisons, not that they're evil. They just by poison I mean something that has stronger consequences than you might suspect. So if you step on a mountainside and suddenly there's an avalanche, just that would be an example of a poison where you got a lot bigger response than you would expect just by stepping on something. So in that case, your step in the right place at the right time was a poison to that mountainside. And everything we do that is a step away from the hunter-gatherer lifestyle has strong effects on us and on our environment, but especially on us. And there are effects that we might not foresee and we might not notice until a long time later, but they're there, and they become more and more wearing and harder to live with. So for more about what I mean about poisons and about why it would be so hard to get away from, why it would be so, why it is that there are so many consequences and very large consequences to our efforts to move in particular directions. That's because the world is what I call tuned. It's to go back to what that tuning is and poisoning. Well, I go back and look at episode 32 about tuning. We're just our bodies and also this world that we grew up in are set up so that everything depends on everything else, and you change one tiny thing and it can make very large consequences for the whole organism. So that's one word for that, or one phrase for that is the butterfly effect. That you change a butterfly flaps its wings here today, and a month later a typhoon may go north instead of south on the other side of the world. Everything on this planet depends on everything else. So now, by saying that our steps away from the hunter-gatherer lifestyle have create a very large burden on us, I'm not saying that we should go back to hunting and gathering. Okay, in fact, I don't recommend it. I'm just saying that everything we do has its price. Okay, every new step we take, every technology we embrace, every change in our lifestyle has its price, and some things are much more pricey than others, or I was also saying poisonous than others. Some things have a much larger impact on us than others, and so we have to choose wisely among them, and pick our poisons wisely. If something has a larger impact on us than something else, then we'll probably use that one less in the long term. There are three steps that we've taken away from the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. One is moving towards farming and pasturing. That happened somewhere around 10,000 years ago. Then the second step was towards coal, oil, and gas, and we really began to do that in a serious way about 250 years ago. In 1970 was a watershed moment for the human race, because that was around that time that the human race began using more coal, oil, and gas than our energy harvest from food, fodder, and wood. So that happened relatively recently, but by now our dominant energy source is coal, oil, and gas. Alongside that embrace of coal, oil, and gas, we began the preparations for a third step away from our original way of living, which was towards energy that is based not on chemicals that come from the biosphere, but instead energy that's delivered and used via electricity. In electricity, we really had very little experience or use of electricity other than lightning storms, and now we're trying to move towards basing our entire economy and our entire life on electricity. So until now, most of our electricity comes from coal, oil, and gas, which is sort of a halfway step, but we're sort of aiming at an arrangement where we aren't using gas-powered motors or cars or appliances anymore. Instead, everything is delivered via electricity, and if possible, all our electricity is generated using renewables. We would like that. Okay. At least we're told that we should like that arrangement. So the third step would be an arrangement where all of our energy comes from these renewables, which especially the three major players among the renewables are wind, solar, and nuclear, and those would be our sources of electricity, and then that would be delivered in one way or another. It would involve a lot of batteries. That would be the third step. So the first step is away from hunting and gathering, is farming and pasturing. The second one is coal, oil, and gas, and then a move towards electricity, and especially this renewable-based electricity. Among the renewables, the least poisonous, the one with the least impact, is wind, because it's fairly small scale. It only costs $3 million to build a modern wind turbine, and the worst are solar and nuclear. I mean, I think when I say worst, I don't mean we shouldn't use them. I just mean the ones with the highest impact for the amount of energy they give. So the further you move from the hunter-gatherer lifestyle, the stronger the impact, the stronger the poison, the more of it you have to the less of it you have to consume before there are consequences, or major consequences. So you can do an awful lot of farming and pasturing with still rather large impacts, but not crippling perhaps, and then Next comes coal, oil, and gas, and they have consequences, and we are enjoying those consequences and suffering under those consequences right now. Perhaps more, and I'll be trying to point out what the consequences are through the rest of this episode. And then we're trying to move towards these renewables and things, and then the consequences will be even more severe. So now I'm going to launch into a discussion of what the burdens are of these different ways of getting energy and resources. And then I will discuss how those burdens are so strong that we're already in collapse, and I'll discuss in particular the case of the United States. And then lastly, I'll talk about how human character, our families, and our own hearts and psyches have morphed and dissolved underneath the impact of the way we've been using energy and other resources, and how that has translated into a pretty thorough collapse of society. And in fact, there's a reason why we're having difficulty pushing our economy any further, or in fact getting much of anything done. It's because of where people are, and who we have become as individual people, as families, and as societies. And that's where I'll wind up this episode. The next two episodes will be about a particular thing that is going on. It's part of the collapse. We're just failing to even have children anymore. We're not particularly interested in it, and we're not having them. And then the fourth episode from now will be winding up and just summing up where we are now and what's going on. So with that, I'll get into what are the burdens, in particular of farming and pasturing, that we're living with already, and then of coal, oil, and gas, and what the burdens are of turning towards renewables. So first I want to talk about the burden on our bodies. And I've mentioned this before, I'm just reviewing. So when we were hunters and gatherers, we stood erect, and we were engaging with everything in sight, which would be from very nearby to kilometers away, and we were constantly on the move. In fact, in a way, we were already dominant in that we could see and interact with and make decisions about everything. Trees and large animals, small animals, and just anything. Now, as we moved into farming and pasturing, we became hunched over our plants, and our diet became very restricted to much fewer species and focused especially on grains, on carbohydrates. And this intensified as we've moved into an era of coal, oil, and gas. Now we're seated at our desks, our chairs, and our sofas. We eat even less species, and we're now very focused on grains and sugar. We're not on the move, and our bodies are pitiful compared to what they were when we were hunters and gatherers. We just can't you can't sustain a day or a week of really vigorous activity outdoors. Most of us can't. Many of us even find a few hours outdoors too much. Our whole body shape is crippled and contorted compared to what it used to be. There's also the starch-based diet. It has immense effects. It fogs the brain. It makes you sleepy. It causes wild changes in mood, and it induces cravings. So you always want a bit more. For a fraction of us, it also creates hyperactivity, diabetes, obesity, and seizures. With obesity, that's not a small fraction anymore. Close to half of the human race is obese or overweight. obese. And I did mention seizures. There are many people with seizures that if they go off of a carb-based diet, the seizures go away. Same with I want to. In fact, I've spent some time on a keto diet, and I don't mean the keto diet that you discuss that you see discussed on YouTube channels or in many cookbooks. I mean specifically what's called a medical keto diet, where you make sure that 9 out of 10 of your calories come from oil, and only 1 out of 10 calories come from protein and carbs. And that's enough to completely change your metabolism. And for many people, a keto diet may be exactly what they need in order to end their seizures, or to end, and for some people to end mental diseases like schizophrenia or depression. It can also end or limit cancer's growth, and it can make immense differences in many other severe diseases, but not for everybody, for a fraction. So who knows why it only works for a fraction, but certainly the human race is paying its price, and that a fraction of our population that would not be suffering from cancers or from schizophrenia or whatever is because we are all eating mostly carbs. And then there's a larger fraction, as I mentioned, with diabetes, obesity, and hyperactivity, and so on. And there's all of us living with the overall fogginess and sleepiness and mood changes that come and go as you eat more or less of the carbs. So that's a pretty big burden. It's just one that we're used to, and we think we're used to, and we just carry it as if it were just normal life. It's not. Another kind of burden that we're carrying is a distance from nature and from beauty. We're starving our souls. We used to be in motion and engaging with the world and very mobile, and in farming and pasturing we constructed parcels of lands and restricted our movement to those parcels. You worked your farm, and we so we were no longer so mobile, and we expelled species from our lands and dominated them more completely. So we just didn't engage with many species, especially ones that we thought were troublesome or dangerous, and we set up homes that were all still inside, and we have the box home where nothing inside is moving, and even our farms were had a lot less moving around on them than before. So you get sleepy, and our minds and our wills became weaker, and we had more and more desire for stimulation, and you see that now with the way we just are so hungry for stimulation, and also makes you more and more ripe for perversion and for addiction. With coal, oil, and gas, it went a step further, and now the big species are very hard to get to, and we can spend days or a week or more without seeing insects, and our houses and so on keep us very safe from weather and from day and night and so on. So no longer living on nature's terms. And non-plant energy would take this all around the world and would turn the whole world into a factory floor. I've gone into this with wind, solar, and nuclear. Green energy isn't green; it's a replacement, and the whole world will turn into a factory floor if we do them. If we build enough to meet our current energy consumption, much less multiply it. So this is a trajectory towards leaving no room for the soul or for the spirit or for beauty or for adventure. then there's some burdens that come with coal, oil, and gas that you don't see so much of with farming and pasturing. Uh, there's all the mines, the roads, the machinery, the cars that we each have, our families have, and other home machinery. There's the pipes, the railways, the shipping, the parking lots, and safety procedures, and smoke and burns and poisoning, and all the things that all the ways that we live with, that we accommodate ourselves to whatever is necessary in order to use coal, oil, and gas in large quantities. In fact, most of our wealth and our resources go to these things, to building nice roads and all the things that are meant to keep us safer on those roads, never very safe, and everything else, all the piping, all the cables, and all the pollution. All of those are a burden that come with, in fact, coal, oil, and gas. Electricity multiplies this, okay, because the materials, the elements that you use to build electrical devices are more poisonous, and also the devices you need are heavier. A car that you can store all the energy for for 6 hours driving in a car, and say 10 gallons or so, less than 50 kilos probably of gasoline is enough. On the other hand, if you want to use you want to go the same distance with batteries, you'll be using 10 or 20 or 30 times as much battery. So everything's heavier, everything's less convenient, and also when you just decide to depend on electricity, it makes you defenseless and vulnerable. Anybody who's running the electrical grid can just turn your electricity off anytime if they like, and can charge you as much as they want. It gets worse when you're relying on wind, solar, nuclear, because then you're relying on a global R&D network, research and development, and also for solar and nuclear, the production of these energy sources is worldwide. It's a worldwide network, so you're always dealing with something anonymous and faceless, that's the supplier. With wind, if your wind turbine is just down the street, then sure, somebody built it, but at least you have access to the energy source. There's also, along the same lines, there's a concentration of power that comes along with embracing first coal, oil, and gas, and then when solar and nuclear. And it makes you much more susceptible to top-down control. Say with coal, oil, and gas, the power is concentrated in the hands of whoever possesses the mines and the pump and the wells, or is able to control them. And it gets worse with wind, solar, and nuclear. Because then you can't even figure out who's in charge of your supply of solar. You just pay whatever price you're told to pay. So there's with this concentration of power, then there's a natural erosion of democracy and of human rights, and I talked about that in episode 50, about top-down control. There's also been, as we embraced electricity, an evolution of our communication between individuals, within families, and within the human race, an evolution from communication towards interaction, and towards manipulating each other and into a post-truth society. And this has very much to do with the fact that we're using electricity a lot. Electricity makes possible, just the video, the use of video. It doesn't. You don't interact with video the same way that you do with words, with in a book or something. It goes straight to a very basic level of your brain and interacts with you on an animal level, and it's great for manipulating and inducing fantasies that you are somebody else, or you are somewhere else, and for forming you in a way that written words don't. Um, in fact, we're in the process of losing our literacy as a human race, and in some decades, most of us will no longer be able to read and write. Instead, we'll be very reliant on our electrical devices. So that's another burden we're carrying. There's also burdens of diseases that we're carrying. One of them is cancer. You can tell that we're paying a price for our choices because you look at North America, you compare cancer rates in North America to cancer rates in Africa, and you find that North Americans have 2.6 times as many cancers total, counting all cancers, as Africans do. And then for many types like kidney, lung, uterus, and rectum cancers, 4 times more. For testicular cancer, 10 times more. Another way of looking at it is historically, so you can dig up people out of their graves, say in England, and you can look at how many people before the multiplications began 250 years ago, how many of English people died with cancer growing within them, and it's something like 1/10 of the people who buried in English cemeteries 250, 400 years ago died with cancer growing within them. Now it's 1/2, and that's not just in England, it's around the world. Now part of it is because people die later, and so there's more time for the cancer to get started. By the way, this is not 1/2 of people dying of cancer. This is, many of these people die from other things, but they have a cancer growing within them. So if the other thing didn't kill them first, they would die of cancer. Anyway, up from 1/10 to 1/2, and as for the causes of cancer, you can go on for days listing things that have been linked to cancer, and there are so many things linked that making these lists and analyzing what might be causing cancer, it just leaves you in deeper and deeper confusion. There's also autism. Okay, autism is linked to dozens of causes, and as so many causes that, again, analysis of the causes just leaves you in confusion and bewilderment. And around the world, there are many scientists who claim that autism in their own countries is increasing. It's hard to tell because the way people define autism and the way that from year to year and from country to country changes. It's hard to be sure, but around the world there are many countries where the scientists believe that autism is increasing. There's also allergy to peanuts, which when I was young was very rare and almost basically unheard of, and now has become very common. This is the kind of thing where you eat something that's been contaminated with a fraction of a gram of peanut oil, so little that you can't possibly taste it, and suddenly you're either on your way to either you're being injected or you're dying. You just go into severe shock, and you can be dead in a few minutes unless somebody has the right needle ready. Okay, and this basically didn't occur, and now it's very common. There's also asthma, which is agreed that asthma has been increasing around the world, and all of these are kind of knots which nobody can untie. There's too many causes, and analysis of the causes doesn't really bring insight. but they're undoubtedly a burden of something about our new way of life. So, in fact, analysis fails us. The method of the intellectual method of understanding things, where you break things apart and look at their details, that fails to solve many of our problems, including the diseases that I just mentioned. And I have an episode about that, episode 37. I recommend that. But I think the biggest burden that we're carrying is that is easy energy, and it gives us a glut of luxury and comfort, and we're not living under pressure, and so we we individually and as societies decay. We become corrupted, and I'll discuss that in the next minutes. But before that, I want to talk about what the collapse looks like in the United States in particular. And in the United States, until around 1970, for some decades until then, those were decades after World War II until 1970, of affluence. It was unquestionably the richest, strongest country in the world, except for some luxury countries, but very small places. But people at that time, they could expect to have lifetime jobs, working for stable companies, have a 40-hour work week, have reliable pay, so there wouldn't be any question about whether they were going to be paid on payday. They had nice retirement plans, they had insurance, health care, they had labor unions, they had their own cars, and they were able to own houses via a mortgage system. They were able to send their children to college. Okay, all the things I just listed are all gone. The factories closed in the U.S. In the 70s and 80s, and it developed a rust belt. Other countries began producing U.S. goods for the U.S. And the successful companies that had come to success in the United States, they went global and they left their hometowns, and now if somebody wants if a city or a state or a country wants a factory located within their confines, they have to beg for it, bargain for it, and reward companies for it. There's no question that the quality of housing and of furniture is much worse than it was, not just in the U.S. but around the world. We buy things that are made out of components that are designed to last for 20 or 30 years, and it's not the hardwoods and the quality components that we used before. The furniture is made out of pulp or out of veneer, things with veneer over them, plastic, maybe a plastic overlay over pulp, and it's not real wood anymore. And the same thing with how we construct our houses. Okay. If I went on about that, we would not finish this episode. In the United States, the health care system is in collapse. There are large areas of cities that are just missing a hospital because the hospital in their area, and when I say large, I mean running on for 10 kilometers in a direction. In one direction may not have a hospital because the hospitals in the city closed, and instead the hospitals were built in rich places far outside the city, suburbs. Same thing with grocery stores. You can have what's called a food desert, where there's 10 kilometers without a serious grocery store. You can spend months of waiting for a basic doctor's appointment. You can spend thousands of dollars for a night in a hospital, and during that hospital have 3 or 4 minutes of attention from a doctor, and also just a few minutes of attention from a nurse. If you go to an emergency room in the U.S., in most cases there's no insurance. Your insurance plan does not apply to care given in an emergency room, so you end up paying out of pocket tens of thousands of dollars for your hours in that emergency room. By now, I'm trying to describe a comprehensive collapse of American society. By now, grade school is, in many schools, about keeping the peace, not about actually teaching. And many high school students graduate from high school without being able to read or write, and without being able to do basic math, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Not everybody, but many. Okay, the universities have become far too expensive, so you have to pay in order to get a four-year education at a decent, not even a good university. You have to pay so much that as much as you would for a house, which means that you won't be able to ever pay it back during your lifetime. The rule of law is breaking down, or has broken down, so that you have encampments of drug addicts in every city. You have ongoing rioting for months. You have borders that are open for years to basically anybody who wants to come in. I can go on about that, but I won't. Everyone in the United States is in debt. It's impossible to avoid. Just to meet your daily, your weekly bills, or to pay for your food, you have to go in debt. There's also addiction, all sorts of addictions. Every kind of addiction is common, and very common. So what we're seeing in the United States is a move towards a new, something that seems a lot like slavery. I've discussed slavery in a preview, but that had more to do with the way things are arranged in other countries, not in the U.S. But there's a transfer of power. You know, somebody who's constantly in debt can't get out of debt. That's a kind of, pretty soon somebody will take advantage of that and will make sure to turn that into something reminiscent of slavery or servitude. In fact, control is being moved into shadowy structures that control economies, or control large multinational companies or consortiums of companies, banks, and so on. And along with that, there's a removal of rights and a loss of any real democracy. It's going on in the U.S., okay? But so that sounds like collapse, but it sounds like somebody's, like, I'm saying the fault is all the powerful people or something, but no, in fact, it's clear that the common man has also reneged on the social contract. It's impossible to say who reneged first on the social contract, whether it was the common man or the powerful people. And as long as the common man is not willing to make a serious attempt at living within a social contract, and there's no way for the larger entities, the governments or the churches or the other building blocks of society to make a serious go at things, they'll fall apart too. So it all went down together. What happened was that there was an embrace of luxury and of comfort, of labor-saving devices, and people stopped walking. They stopped maintaining and repairing the things in their own home, their own clothes. They began using throwaway things, and they just, when you do this, then you stop knowing how to do these things, and they became weak and poor at using their hands and eyes and back, doing anything that required strength, and more sick, and I think I discussed this in episode 52. It seems to me that real work, in the sense of really using your full body and taking some risk now and then when necessary, and really being responsible for making sure the business succeeds, adjusting and improving in ways above and beyond what anybody encourages you to do, taking on real intellectual challenges, being willing to sweat. This is just not up for discussion. For most Americans, we're not willing to really work. The sort of work that requires endurance and risk and effort It's not something we want to do anymore. Um, in fact, there are less and less entrepreneurs, people who start their own businesses, their own bakeries, their own car repair shops, or whatever. Just less and less. In fact, we have chain stores instead, because people do not want to take that kind of responsibility or do that sort of thinking. So we still have people who are willing to immolate themselves and work it, and do a lot of drudgery and engage in a rat race in the office, okay, and say that they're giving themselves, but in fact they aren't. They aren't really making full use of as they're going through the rat race, they aren't really making full use of their talents and physical strength. So I'll just tell a short story. I'm from Dayton, Ohio, and there's a very large company that was NCR, National Cash Register, which had a monopoly, a worldwide monopoly on building cash registers. Those are the things that in the day when somebody wanted to buy something at a store, there was a cash register that held the money and counted how much was purchased during the day, and so somebody at the cash register would ring up your purchase and would take your money and give you back some change and print out a receipt for you, and these were valuable objects, and National Cash Register had a monopoly on them, and so they did very well, and their employees in Ohio also did very well. They had lots of perks and so on, and around in fact they had a very nice life, but they must have not been quite giving their all to it anymore, and at some point National Cash Register began losing business share because other up and coming companies around the world started making electric ones and cheaper ones, and they just they failed to keep up with in particular the transition into digital technologies. And at the same time, their workers back home in Ohio were striking for higher wages and better benefits. So the workers had failed to really stay abreast of the situation, to keep NCR abreast of the situation and keep it competitive, and at the same time they felt that they deserved better benefits. So it was a lose-lose proposition. Both sides lost, both sides reneged, and in the end NCR closed down its factories in Ohio, moved factories elsewhere, but also just became a shell of its original self and was never regained anything like the glory it had had. We also have, for instance, I lived in Italy for a while, and certainly in the around 2000, there was still a culture in Italy that had been going on for decades, where workers there expected to work. Well, you got a job that was guaranteed for a lifetime. It was illegal to lose your job. And then once you got that job, you would work a couple hours in the morning, 2 or 3 hours, with coffee breaks, and coffee being outside the building. You'd go outside to a little place that served coffee, and then come back in and have a chat along the way, and then again 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon. And you can guess how that wound up. Okay? Workers who don't give their all will lose their say and their respect and everything that one would like from a job. Okay? Sooner or later. It may take decades of a good life before you finally lose it all, but you will lose it all. It's a consequence of reneging on the social contract. Okay? So by now, Americans are arriving at the situation where many are trying to get along by doing DoorDash food delivery, where they using their own car and with no guarantees, no benefits, nothing. They'll do exactly. They get work. The work that they get is delivering one meal to one family, and then they see whether they can get another job like that. Not a job. It's more like slavery. So the worst poison that we are experiencing is this glut of easy energy and of other resources. We live in luxury and self-indulgence. We become unable to give our best at work or in any other situation. Our characters are transformed. We're told over and over again that the greatest love of all is loving yourself, whatever, which means it has nothing to do with love. Or I deserve this, I deserve that. We develop personas of righteousness, of I am, of being righteous, of having power, thinking you're powerful, of being superior, of enlightenment, or also personas where you have a deeply held belief that you come from a particularly flawed family, a defective family, and you blame, and you consider yourself marked for life by that. So in reality, behind these personas and these stories that we tell ourselves and that we're taught to tell ourselves, in reality we play the fool. Okay, we're always taking and we're acting out fantasy personas. They're not real. They're not really righteous, superior, enlightened, smart, fashionable, powerful, and so on. Okay, in fact, we're taught to prize all of the 7 deadly sins, and I'll list them: pride, lust, self-promotion, envy, despair, greed, gluttony, laziness, self-indulgence, self-pity. So all the talk about needing counseling or healing yourself or healing wounds or investigating traumas. We do not practice mercy towards each other. We hold bitterness and revenge and rebelliousness and violence. And in the end, because we prize these things, which everyone could have known are going to destroy you and the people around you, we can't tell who is a friend and who's not. We have lots of mental illness, lots of personality disorders. We have addictions. Every addiction is very common. Fetishes, dependencies on people, and we're dependent on anything and everything. We're unable to make and sustain real choices, really follow through, and we're ready to be controlled and to be propagandized. Okay. In fact, there's no longer a social contract. Nobody can keep faith with one another, and we cannot maintain a bond. I'd say there are some exceptions, right? But in general, that's where most of us are. In fact, our families have become communes, where most of the people in the family are actually TVs, videos, AI agents, and text messages coming in and back and forth, and there's plus all the time spent at school or at work. So family members have very limited time with it and are constantly distracted by all the other, the millions of other people effectively walking in and out of the room through the TV or the text messages or the AI. Okay. There's no one-on-one time with parents. The formation that children receive is not from parents. Instead, they're from the formation a child receives nowadays is from his phone. Okay. And the parents have become just providers of the hotel. Okay, a shared dwelling. Okay, people can come and go, but they have no real connection with each other anymore. So, with no formation from the parents, there's no respect given to the parents, and in fact society in general, the movies and everything, the social workers, the teachers, they constantly encourage children to suspect their parents, to rebel against them, to disrespect them, and to be selfish. So our books, even for toddlers, many of our children's books have long discussions of all the different professions you might choose and who do you want to be? Who do you want to be? There's no sense of, it's all about you. It's all about, there's no sense of ancestry or of having something to pass on to your children or grandchildren. There's also no sacrifice, that we make very little sacrifice for the aged or the sick. We send them off to nursing homes, hospitals. We're moving on beyond that to euthanasia. We don't spend time with them. We aren't willing to let them, say, my sick father live with me. Not willing to change his diapers, and they're handicapped, and don't visit cemeteries very often anymore. Don't think about that much. Don't think about the dead. And I think, and even our children are shipped off to nursery schools so we can do our very, very, very important work. So in this scenario, sex and marriage and childbearing are done because of personal whims. I feel like it today. And they're done on your own terms. And what they mean and what the terms for sex and marriage and childbearing, you decide what it means today, and there are no rules. There's no larger meaning to them. They're just episodes in a soap opera, okay? And there's no commitment, okay? You happen to have a child today, and in 2 years from now you've decided you've had enough of that. You decide to move on to something else. So we arrive at parallel lives, manipulating each other, divorce. More and more people are choosing to just live alone for the duration of their life. For instance, here in Korea, just maybe, I don't know if there are boyfriends or girlfriends, but they just don't want to live with anybody, much less get married. And many people have no parents, effectively, or many parents, and there's a lot of abortion, right? There's no vows and no responsibility. The word vow is meaningless now. I have to say all of this is to the advantage in some sense of big business and power and technocracy. It's a short-term advantage. In the end, it will destroy everyone and everything. Okay? And already our economy and our society is crumbling under this burden. But in the short term, it's an advantage because atomized people and weak families are a compliant workforce. They're desperate for success. Okay, an unstable family does not gather and wield power and does not compete with anyone who's powerful. Okay, they're better consumers because you get your fulfillment from what you consume. You're a good consumer, not from your non-existent family and bonds. We're more easily influenced and informed by media, by schools, and so on. So anyway, we're good grist for the mill. So in general, there's no room for self-sacrifice or for service, courage, faithfulness, common good, or discussion. I forgot to mention, also with all this in place, you can look at, for instance, at who's willing to go to war and die in a war. Okay, and it used to be that, for instance, in the U.S. Civil War, a good fraction of the U.S. male population went to war, and a good fraction of those died. Now, we've gotten to the point where 30 Americans or 3 Americans die in a military action, and it's a scandal. It's a every life counts, but people just don't want to fight, and they can't believe it when somebody's willing to die, or when somebody has died. It's somebody went wrong. The government's wrong. Something's wrong, that anybody could have died for any reason. in this war. So I'm not for wars. I'm just saying, you know, the kind of, you know, I think the kind of people just aren't willing to sacrifice. I'm not saying that people should fight wars. Okay, I think in some circumstances you must fight. Okay, and you should be ready to fight if you really care and if you're willing to serve and sacrifice. You have to be ready to fight. Okay, but and many of us, most of us, just aren't there right now. Courage is gone. The integrity is gone. So in this scenario, the public square has disappeared. We can't dialogue or discuss. There's no room for community anymore. We have manipulation. All the communication we have is entertainment and manipulation and power plays. And we are spending a lot of time keeping the wrong people out. Say with gated communities or suburbs, we isolate ourselves and we exert power, right? If you can't dialogue, if you don't have a social contract anymore, all that's left is power and violence. Okay. Now, what's going on? This pattern is I'm discussing the end of civilization and the collapse of the human race, and for some decades it may seem that we're still able to grow, but under this burden of just complete fragmentation of even the human psyche and of families and of communities, and an inability for workers and businesses to cooperate in any sense, what's left is collapse. We're unable to grow economically, we're unable to get anything really done, and we're in chaos. So overall, that's where we are as a human race right now. We haven't run out of energy just yet, but already the glut of energy and also all the other burdens that we picked up as we moved away from hunter-gatherer lifestyle into this lifestyle that we have now, it just we're staggering under it, and we're not just staggering, we're collapsing. Part of that collapse is that we can't even get it together to do one of the easiest things, something that every species knows how to do and spends almost all of its energy doing, and we just can't seem to get it together to do it. We can't reproduce. We are failing to reproduce. I'll discuss that in the next two episodes, next week and the following week. In the meantime, and all of this is about a collapse, I want to say it affects me personally. I'm living through it, and all sorts of things I can see are not going well for people that I love, and for my own family and myself, and for society. I wish things were a lot different, but it's just the truth, and you have to say the truth when you see it. And I think I'm not hopeless as I say this is a prepping channel, how to thrive, flourish, and reproduce. I think there is a way forward, okay? But in order to see the way forward, you have to see where you are, and this is where we are now, okay? How to navigate through this chaos and carnage and into some future for your family. That's going to be the business of the rest of this channel. I wish you a good week, and I mean, don't take this as well, I mean, for me at least, I've lived with this long enough and thought about this long enough that it's just part of life. It's just the burden that I live with, that we all live with, and it's better to see the burden and think about what to do with it. I hope that this is something that can give you some peace and help you to begin to think, okay, well, if this is where things are right now, what is the way forward? Okay, I hope you don't take this as the end of the story. It's not. It's not the end of the story at all. Okay, with that, I ask if you know anybody who may be interested in this content, please invite them to join in and watch. Please keep coming back yourself, and have a wonderful week. Okay, keep coming back.